Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you all here today because we're embarking on a genuinely fascinating character investigation. We're looking at one of the most famous novels in Canadian literature, Anne of Green Gables. But we aren't just doing a broad overview. No, we're zooming right in on a massive turning point in Chapter 6. We're going to put Marilla Cuthbert under the microscope and uncover the real mystery behind her big choice.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to put yourself in this situation for a second. Imagine you're living a perfectly quiet, structured, and entirely organized life. You know exactly what to expect every day, and then suddenly, a complete stranger is dropped right onto your doorstep. A stranger who is messy, loud, and totally unexpected. Would you, in a split second, decide to change the entire trajectory of your life for them? I mean, it's a massive life-altering choice, isn't it? Well, for all our grade 8 learners joining us today, that is exactly the puzzle we are going to crack. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the initial mistake of the unwanted orphan boy, explore Anne's starved past, and meet the truly terrifying Mrs. Blewett. Then we'll break down Marilla's exact turning point, look at her unspoken transformation, and finally hand it over to you for a class discussion.
Section 1. The Unwanted Orphan Boy, the Collision of Two Realities. To really understand this collision, you have to remember that the aging siblings, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, originally wanted to adopt an orphan boy for farm labor. Instead, they got an 11-year-old girl. And this brilliantly illustrates the extreme clash in personalities that makes Marilla's eventual change of heart so deeply surprising. Just look at the contrast. On one side, we have Marilla. She's strict, practical, highly unsentimental, and a strict disciplinarian. She literally embodies Victorian stoicism. On the other side, we have Anne. She is highly emotional, incredibly dramatic, deeply imaginative, and we can't forget this, she's severely traumatized by her past in the asylum. They're complete polar opposites. Marilla initially views Anne's vivid imagination not as some beautiful gift, but as something to be highly suspicious of. Section 2. A Starved, Unloved Life, Finding the First Clue. Right at the beginning of Chapter 6, Marilla fully intends to just give Anne away. Let's map out the plot beats of this really famous buggy ride over to Mrs. Spencer's house. Step 1. They begin the long drive to White Sands. Step 2. During this drive, Anne actually opens up. She tells Marilla her history of bouncing from the asylum to neglectful foster homes, describing a life filled with drudgery, poverty, and endlessly caring for younger children. And step 3, Marilla simply listens. She doesn't interrupt to scold Anne like she normally would. Instead, the text tells us that Marilla was shrewd enough to read between the lines of Anne's history and divine the truth. So, the crucial point is this incredible quote right here. Pity was suddenly stirring in her heart for the child. What a starved, unloved life she had had. This is a massive internal shift for Marilla. We finally see that beneath her tough, sensible, and super strict exterior, she's actually hiding a deeply empathetic heart. She is genuinely moved by Anne's vulnerability. But, pity alone isn't quite enough to make her change her mind about keeping her. She needs a push. Section 3. The Threat of Mrs. Blewett, the Catalyst. Just when Marilla is literally about to hand Anne over, a terrifying new option appears. Let's look at why Mrs. Blewett is the absolute perfect and perfectly terrifying catalyst for this whole scene. The sources highlight that Mrs. Blewett has a notorious reputation around Avonlea. When she speaks, she does so ungraciously, and she makes it abundantly crystal clear that she doesn't want to love an orphan. She wants an orphan solely to be a terrible worker. For a child who has already suffered a starved, unloved life of drudgery, Mrs. Blewett represents a direct continuation of that nightmare. When Marilla sees this, she physically and emotionally recoils. Section 4. Marilla makes her choice. The turning point. All right, we have reached the climax of Chapter 6. Let's walk chronologically through the exact sequence of events that finally cracks Marilla's hardened exterior. Moment 1, Mrs. Blewett steps right up and demands Anne, ready to take her right then and there. Moment 2, Marilla hesitates. She makes a quick excuse, saying she needs time to think about the suggestion. And then Moment 3, in a completely stunning reversal, Marilla takes Anne by the hand and brings her all the way back to Green Gables. In that fleeting, split second, empathy wins right over duty. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible balancing act taking place in Marilla's mind. She's a woman who has suppressed her feelings for decades, right? So she desperately attempts to justify her highly emotional, empathetic decision with pure logic. She tells herself, what if she should indulge Matthew's unaccountable whim and let her stay? She literally blames Matthew for her own choice. She also rationalizes it by viewing Anne as a teachable little thing. It's just a wonderful character detail, showing exactly how hard it is for Marilla to just admit she actually cares.
Section 5. An unspoken transformation, a quiet rebellion. This brings us to the immediate aftermath of the decision, which introduces this brilliant literary concept of internal conflict. Marilla has just executed a quiet rebellion against her own strict rules, but she isn't quite ready to wave the victory flag just yet. The text shows us that Marilla actually decides not to tell Anne the good news before she goes to bed. In fact, she keeps Anne busy with chores all the next morning before finally breaking the news. Why keep a life-changing secret for the entire night? Well, it links directly to Marilla's deep discomfort with vulnerability and her strong Victorian need for control. She basically needs time to process this massive shift in her own reality before she can even say it out loud.
But someone does know what's happened. When Marilla and Anne return, Matthew's face is just a glow of delight. Remember, earlier in the story, Matthew had told Marilla we might be some good to her. And now, Marilla has finally come to see things from his compassionate perspective. Matthew's silent support gave Marilla the exact permission she needed to finally open her heart. Section 6. Class Discussion. Marilla's Heart. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final analytical phase to really set up your classroom activity. We've uncovered the clues and analyzed Marilla's quiet rebellion together. Now it's your turn to test your understanding. I want you to use the exact textual evidence we just walked through to tackle these discussion points. First up, is Marilla keeping Anne out of duty to Matthew, out of pity for Anne's past, or is it the very beginning of actual love? Second, how does Marilla's famous strictness actually act as a shield to hide her deep empathy? And third, based on the rigid Victorian society she lives in, why is it so incredibly hard for Marilla to just express her feelings directly? As you head into your class debate, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Can someone be incredibly strict on the outside, yet still be the most deeply loving person in the room? Marilla Cuthbert's choice proves that sometimes the hardest shells protect the softest hearts. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Have an absolutely amazing discussion and keep diving deep into the text.